Lily Baker stepped down from the stagecoach with a suitcase in her hand and hope in her heart, never knowing that the man she had crossed 1,000 miles to marry was already in the ground. The wheels of the coach rolled away in a cloud of dust, leaving her alone on the main street of Redemption Creek, Colorado. The year was 1875. The town was smaller than she imagined. One dirt road, a saloon, a church, a mercantile at the far end that was supposed to belong to Richard Blackwood, the man who had promised her a new life. At 22, Lily had left behind poverty in Boston. She had left long nights of sewing until her fingers bled. She had left the cold apartment where she once dreamed of something better. She came west to marry a merchant she only knew from letters. She came for security, for safety, for a future. Yet she had packed her life into one trunk for a man she had never met. She had barely taken 3 steps when the saloon doors burst open. A tall cowboy stumbled out, dust on his boots and anger in his eyes. He straightened his hat and saw her standing there, clutching her suitcase like it was the only thing holding her together. His blue eyes narrowed. "You must be the mail-order bride," he said. "Yes," Lily answered with quiet dignity. "I am here to meet Mr. Richard Blackwood." The cowboy's face changed, not with kindness, not with humor. "With respect, miss," he said slowly. "Richard Blackwood was buried 3 weeks ago." The world tilted beneath her feet. The letters, the promises, the journey, the future she imagined, all gone. She felt the blood drain from her face as he explained how Richard had been shot in a land dispute, how letters took time, how death did not wait for brides traveling west. Her fiancé was dead, and she had no money to return home. The cowboy introduced himself as Jake Sullivan, rancher, neighbor to the Blackwoods, a man who looked like trouble and safety at the same time. Before Lily could gather her thoughts, hoofbeats thundered down the street. One of Martin Blackwood's men rode in early, eyes sharp and hungry. Martin Blackwood was Richard's brother, a gambler, a drunk, worse than the man she was meant to marry. Jake stepped in front of her. "She's not waiting for Martin," he said firmly. The rider smirked. Martin already paid for everything his brother arranged. That includes the woman. "I am not property," Lily said, her voice stronger than her shaking hands. The man only laughed. Yet when he rode away with a warning that Martin would arrive by nightfall, Jake turned to her, jaw tight. "You leave with me now," he said, "or you wait for Martin Blackwood." There was something in his tone, not command, not ownership, protection. She looked at the empty street, at the saloon, at the town that had already betrayed her. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. Jake nodded once. "Then you're not leaving with anyone but me." And just like that, her life changed direction. He took her by wagon through back roads to his ranch in the valley beyond the hills. Sullivan Ranch, wide land, clean air, honest work, a small homestead cabin waiting for her. He offered her employment, separate quarters, fair pay, safety. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she knew she could not trust the Blackwoods. But by nightfall, she was standing inside a small stone chimney cabin with dust floating in lamplight. It was simple, clean, solid. It felt safer than anything she had known in Boston. Jake brought food, bread, cheese, dried beef. He spoke little, but when he looked at her, it wasn't with hunger. It was with concern. "Bar the door tonight," he told her. "Keep the rifle near your bed." The rifle frightened her. The man offering to protect her did not. Days passed. She scrubbed floors, cleared weeds from the garden, learned to care for chickens, learned to ride a mare named Daisy. The ranch hands treated her with respect. Martha, the foreman's wife, became her first friend in Colorado. Each evening, Jake came by to check on her. Each evening, she felt safer. And then Martin Blackwood returned. Gunshots shattered the quiet of the valley. When 3 riders circled her cabin, Jake rode toward them with his rifle raised. Tucker, Blackwood's man, delivered a message. $500 for the woman. Jake's answer was simple. She's not for sale. The next morning, 10 riders approached the ranch house. Martin Blackwood himself led them. And this time, he brought the sheriff beaten and tied behind a horse. "Send out the woman," Martin called, "or I burn this ranch to the ground." Inside the house, Lily's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Men were about to die because of her. Jake stood in the yard, unafraid. Without thinking, Lily ran outside. "Mr. Blackwood," she called. "I am Lily Baker." Jake's face went pale. She stood beside him anyway. "I choose where I go," she said clearly. "And I choose to stay." Martin smiled like a wolf. Then rifles cocked from a new direction. United States cavalry rode over the ridge, led by Captain Monroe. Martin Blackwood was arrested. His men disarmed. The danger ended as fast as it began. When silence finally fell over the yard, Jake turned to her, his eyes full of something that made her breath catch. "When I saw you in town," he said quietly, "I knew you weren't leaving with anyone but me." And for the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, Lily Baker felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The ranch did not sleep peacefully after Martin Blackwood's arrest. Even though the cavalry had taken him away in chains, a shadow still lingered over Sullivan Ranch. Men like Martin did not forget. They did not forgive. And Lily knew in her heart that danger did not disappear so easily. The next morning, Redemption Creek buzzed with whispers. Some praised Jake for standing his ground. Others muttered that trouble always followed a woman who came west alone. Lily heard the rumors when she rode into town with Martha to sell eggs and vegetables from her garden. Eyes followed her. Some kind, some curious, some judging. Jake noticed. When they returned to the ranch, he dismounted and helped her down from Daisy with careful hands. "People talk," he said quietly. "Let them. You owe no one an explanation." Lily lifted her chin. "I have done nothing wrong." "You haven't," Jake agreed, his voice steady. "And anyone who says otherwise answers to me." The way he said it made her pulse quicken. That evening, as the sun painted the sky gold and crimson, Jake asked her to walk with him to the ridge overlooking the valley, the same ridge where he once came to think alone. They stood side by side in silence at first. The wind lifted her skirt slightly. The scent of sage drifted through the air. Below them, cattle moved slowly across the pasture like dark shadows. "I've been thinking," Jake said at last. "That sounds serious," Lily replied softly. "It is." He turned toward her fully, his blue eyes darker in the fading light. "I meant what I said," he continued, "about courting you properly." Lily's breath caught. "Jake," she whispered, "it has only been a few weeks." "I know," he said, "and maybe I should move slower. But every morning I wake up thinking about you. Every evening I find myself riding here just to make sure you're safe. And when you walked out into that yard to face Martin Blackwood," he paused, jaw tightening. "I have never been more afraid in my life." She saw it then. Not just strength, not just pride. Love. "I was afraid too," she admitted. "Not of him, of losing you." The confession hung between them like something fragile and powerful. Jake stepped closer. "Lily," he said gently, "you came west packed for a man you'd never met. I won't be that kind of man to you. I want you to know me, to choose me freely. No pressure, no arrangements, just choice." She reached for his hand. "I am choosing," she said quietly. Before he could respond, a rider appeared in the distance on the road from town. Jake stiffened instantly. "Stay here," he murmured. But Lily did not stay. She followed as he moved down the ridge toward the approaching horse. Out it was Sheriff Collins, alive, bruised, furious. "They've escaped," he announced as he reined in his horse. Jake's expression went cold. "Blackwood?" "Transferred to Denver," the sheriff explained. "But 2 of his men broke free on the road last night. Tucker among them." Lily felt her stomach tighten. "They're wounded," the sheriff continued. "But desperate men are dangerous men. They were last seen riding north. Could be heading back this way." Jake's hand instinctively moved to his gun. "We'll double watches," he said calmly. "They won't take this ranch." The sheriff nodded. "I'll post a deputy in town, but keep your people alert." When the sheriff rode away, silence settled again. "I thought it was over," Lily said softly. "It will be," Jake replied. "But until then, you stay close to the house." That night, the ranch felt different. Watch fires burned near the barn. 2 men stood guard at the perimeter. The wind carried every distant sound like a warning. Lily lay awake in her bed in the main house, staring at the ceiling. A knock sounded at her door. Her heart jumped. "It's me," Jake said quietly from outside. She opened the door. He stood there without his hat, hair slightly tousled, eyes tired but alert. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Neither can I." He hesitated, then spoke softly. "There's a storm coming tomorrow. Weather's turning. If Tucker is out there wounded, he'll be looking for shelter. And if he finds it here?" Jake's jaw tightened. "He won't." But even as he said it, a distant crack of thunder rolled across the valley. The next afternoon, the storm hit hard. Rain lashed the windows. A wind howled across the fields. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. And just before dusk, one of the ranch hands shouted from the barn. "Riders!" Jake grabbed his rifle. Hank and Lewis followed. Lily stood in the doorway, heart hammering as 2 dark shapes emerged through the rain near the far fence line. Tucker and another man. They were injured, soaked, furious. Jake stepped forward into the rain. "This ends tonight," he called. Tucker spat into the mud. "You think you've won? You lost the moment you stepped on this land again." Thunder cracked overhead. The 2 escaped men reached for their weapons. And in that instant, Lily realized something terrifying. This fight was not about money. It was about pride, about power, about a man who refused to accept that a woman could choose her own life. Well, Jake raised his rifle. Lightning flashed across the sky, and the first shot rang out. The gunshot cracked through the storm like lightning striking the earth. For a split second, everything froze. Rain poured down in sheets. Wind howled across the open land. The smell of gunpowder mixed with wet dirt and fear. Jake did not miss. His bullet struck the second rider's shoulder, spinning him from the saddle into the mud. Tucker fired wildly in return, but the shot went wide, buried somewhere in the fence post near the barn. Hank and Lewis moved fast. Years of working cattle together had made them move like one body. Lewis tackled the wounded rider before he could crawl for his gun. Hank pinned Tucker's arm just as he tried to fire again. Tucker fought like a cornered animal. Mud streaked his face. Rage burned in his eyes. "Yet you think this is over?" he spat at Jake. "Martin always comes back." Jake stepped forward, rain sliding down his face, rifle steady in his hands. "Not this time." He pressed the barrel against Tucker's chest, and for the first time, Tucker's confidence cracked. Sheriff Collins arrived not 10 minutes later with 2 deputies who had taken shelter near town when the storm began. They hauled Tucker and the other man away in chains, soaked and beaten, but alive. The ranch stood untouched. The storm slowly passed, and silence returned. Lily had not moved from the porch the entire time. When Jake finally turned toward her, mud on his boots and rain dripping from his hat, she saw something shift in his expression. Relief. He crossed the yard in long strides. "You should have stayed inside," he said, though his voice held no anger. "I couldn't," she answered softly. "Not when you were out here." He stopped just inches from her. "You scare me when you do that," he admitted. "You run toward danger like you don't understand how fragile life can be." She reached up and touched his cheek, brushing away rain and dirt. "I understand it perfectly," she said. "That's why I won't waste it hiding." The tension drained from his shoulders. He pulled her into his arms right there in the mud, in front of the ranch hands, in front of the fading storm. "I won't lose you," he whispered against her hair. "You won't," she answered. That night, the ranch felt different. Not tense, not fearful, strong. They had faced the worst of Martin Blackwood's shadow and survived it. The next morning, under clear skies washed clean by rain, Captain Monroe returned with official orders. Tucker and the escaped rider would be transported under heavy guard. Blackwood's empire in Denver was collapsing under investigation. His power was finished. Justice had finally caught up. Jake walked Lily to the ridge later that afternoon. The valley stretched below them, peaceful and bright. Cattle grazed quietly. The creek sparkled under the sun. "It's done," Jake said. "Yes," Lily agreed. He turned to her slowly. "I've been thinking about what you said," he continued. "About choosing freely." She smiled gently. And I don't want to wait anymore." He removed his hat and held it against his chest, something almost boyish in the gesture. "Lily Baker," he said steadily, "you came west packed for a man you had never seen. I don't want to be that man. I want to be the one you wake up beside every morning by choice, not arrangement." Her heart beat so loudly she could hear it in her ears. "I don't have fancy speeches," he admitted. "I don't have wealth like the Blackwoods, but I have this land, this ranch, and every honest part of my heart." He stepped closer. "Will you marry me?" The wind moved softly through the grass. The valley waited. Lily did not hesitate. "Yes." The word left her lips like it had been waiting there all along. Jake's face broke into a smile brighter than the morning sun. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, not rushed, not desperate, but certain. Certain like the mountains behind them. Certain like the land beneath their feet. They were married 3 months later under the wide Colorado sky. Martha cried. Hank stood proudly beside Jake. Sheriff Collins attended with his arm still in a sling. Even Captain Monroe sent his congratulations. There were no arrangements, no contracts, no ownership. Only choice. 2 years later, Lily stood on the porch of the main ranch house, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching her husband ride in from the north pasture. Sullivan Ranch had grown. More cattle, more land, more laughter in the halls of the house. Jake dismounted and climbed the porch steps 2 at a time. "Should you be standing in this heat?" he asked, with playful concern. "Our son is restless," she answered, with a knowing smile. Jake placed his hand over hers on her belly, eyes filled with wonder. "You were packed for a stranger," he said softly. "And now, You're building a life with me." "I was packed for the wrong man," she replied. "But I arrived at the right place." He kissed her forehead. "I told you that day in town," he reminded her. "You weren't leaving with anyone but me." She smiled